All right, let's talk about one of the most famous and maybe one of the most intimidating books ever written, Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace. Now, I know what you're thinking. The size of this thing alone can be a bit much. But trust me, we're going to break it all down and find out why this masterpiece is actually way more approachable and relevant than you might think. At its heart, this massive book is really just trying to answer a question that, let's be honest, we've all asked ourselves. What's the point? What's the purpose of our lives, of love, of war, of anything really? It's a huge question, and Tolstoy's attempt to answer it was, well, just as huge. So where do you even start with a 1,200-page answer to the meaning of life? Well, for Tolstoy, it started with himself. Before he even put pen to paper, he was going through a major personal crisis. He felt like everything, his life, God, society, it was all completely meaningless. And this gigantic book, it was his way of finding an answer. To really get War and Peace, you have to first get the guy who wrote it. See, this wasn't just some intellectual exercise for Tolstoy. No, this was a deeply personal search for answers, and it all kicked off with a complete and total breakdown. This is exactly what Tolstoy was going through, a full-on existential crisis. He just felt totally lost, questioning the very reason for his existence. You know that feeling? It's that deep sense of disillusionment that really lit a fire under him to find some kind of purpose, not just for him, but for all of us. So what did he do? He basically did what a lot of us only dream of doing when we're overwhelmed. He just escaped. He went back to his family's big country estate, he worked in the fields, and he just spent months thinking about the very questions that were eating him alive. And what came out of all that soul-searching? This. 5 years. A 5-year writing marathon that started as a small political novel and just exploded into the epic that we know today. It became his definitive answer to that crisis. So how exactly did Tolstoy try to answer these huge questions? Well, he drops us right into the super rich world of the Russian aristocracy at the beginning of the 19th century. We're talking glamorous balls, fancy dinners, a whole society obsessed with who's who, and it's all happening with the shadow of Napoleon's army stretching across Europe. Now, to help us navigate this world, Tolstoy gives us a few key people to follow. There are two big families and one really important outsider. First up, you've got the Rostovs. They're all about passion and honor, especially the young Natasha and her brother Nikolai. Then you have the more serious, intellectual Bolkonskis, the cynical soldier Prince Andrei and his super religious sister Maria, who are both looking for some higher purpose. And the guy who connects them all? That's Pierre Bezukhov, this awkward, kind-hearted guy who suddenly inherits a fortune and has zero idea what to do with his life. And these two friends, Andrei and Pierre, they really represent two totally different ways of looking for meaning. Andrei is brilliant, but kind of jaded. He's sick of the fake high society life and thinks, maybe I'll find my purpose on the battlefield. Pierre, on the other hand, is a bit clumsy and idealistic. He literally has everything you could want, money, a title, but he feels completely lost and is just desperately searching for some big idea to believe in. So the peace parts of the novel are packed with all this juicy stuff. Romance, betrayal, family drama. Natasha falls for Andrei, Pierre gets stuck in a terrible marriage, Nikolai racks up massive gambling debts. But here's the thing, all of this personal drama is happening on borrowed time because history is about to come knocking loudly. And oh, does it crash the party? This is one of the coolest things about the novel. It shows how these huge historical events you read about in textbooks aren't abstract things. They are forces that just slam into people's lives and force everyone to deal with a harsh new reality. This quote right here, it perfectly sums up the vibe in Russia. For the elites, this wasn't just politics, it was practically a holy war. They looked at Napoleon's France, with all its revolution and secular ideas, as a threat to their entire way of life. They truly believed it was Russia's divine mission to save the world from him. And so, the inevitable happens. In 1805, Russia officially joins the fight. Full of pride and confidence, the Russian army marches off to face Napoleon, which leads directly to the first massive battle in the book, the absolute disaster that was the Battle of Austerlitz. And wow, this line just perfectly captures the shock of that defeat. The Russian army, so sure they were going to win, just completely falls apart. Their commander, General Kutuzov, gets wounded, but he basically says his physical wound is nothing. The real wound, it's the shame and the shattered morale of his retreating army.
And this is where Tolstoy's genius really kicks in. He shows us how this huge historical moment feels for each person. Prince Andrei, who went to war looking for glory, gets wounded. He finally sees his hero, Napoleon, up close, and feels absolutely nothing. Total disillusionment. Meanwhile, young Nikolai Rostov isn't terrified of the enemy. He's paralyzed by the sight of his own beloved emperor crying. For both of them, the big, noble ideas about war just crumble.
After the shock of that battle, the whole story kind of shifts. The war has shattered everyone's illusions, so now they have to try and find meaning not in some grand ideal, but in the messy, chaotic, and often painful reality of their own lives.
And let me tell you, no one's search is messier than poor Pierre's, as you can see here. I mean, it's a journey a lot of us can probably relate to, right? Just trying to find where you fit. He tries everything. He gets stuck in a miserable marriage. He looks for answers with the Freemasons, which was this kind of secret spiritual society. And he even ends up a prisoner of war. His search takes him to rock bottom before he finally finds his answer.
And the personal crises just keep piling up. Natasha, while she's waiting for Andrei to come back, gets seduced by this total scoundrel, and their engagement blows up in a huge scandal. Pierre, meanwhile, is so unhappy in his marriage that he challenges a guy to a duel. A clumsy, ridiculous duel that he somehow manages to survive. Everybody is just completely lost.
And just when it seems like their personal lives can't get any worse, history crashes the party again. And this time, it's bigger than anything that came before. In 1812, Napoleon invades Russia. And this sequence you see here, the insane Battle of Borodino, the burning of Moscow, and that horrifying winter retreat of the French army, this is the epic heart of the entire book.
But amidst all the fire and chaos of the retreat from Moscow, Natasha, who's now a refugee herself, discovers that a mortally wounded Andrei is in the same wagon train. And in this incredibly powerful, heartbreaking moment, they reconcile. She sits with him, she nurses him until he dies. And through that act of selfless love and incredible loss, that flighty young girl finally becomes a woman.
Okay, so after 1,200 pages of war, love, death, and searching, what's the big takeaway? What did Tolstoy actually conclude? And why do we still talk about this book today? It all comes down to the profound answers he offers to that question from the very beginning. So what are Tolstoy's big answers? Well, first, he argues that these so-called great men, like Napoleon, they don't really control history. He says history is like this massive, unstoppable river made up of the tiny choices of millions of ordinary people. And his second, more personal answer is that true meaning, real purpose, you don't find it out there in glory or big ideas. You find it in here, in the simple, everyday stuff. Love, family, forgiveness, and just connecting with life. And that is exactly where our heroes end up. After all that searching, all that suffering, they don't find some grand, abstract purpose for humanity. No, they find peace with each other. Pierre and Natasha, who have both been broken and rebuilt, they find love and start a family. Same with Nikolai and Maria. Their happiness is quiet, it's domestic, and it's real. And so that's where we'll leave it. After taking us through the sweep of history and the depths of the human soul, Tolstoy's final answer is surprisingly simple. He asks us to wonder if maybe, just maybe, the greatest thing a person can do isn't to change the world, but simply to live a good life, to build a loving home. What do you think? It's a question that's just as powerful today as it was 150 years ago.